According to Canada's failed finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, if the Liberal government doesn't increase the capital gains tax, the country is literally going to burn to the ground. And by the way, democracy is at stake. Insane? Well, not according to Freeland. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Warren Kinsella and Brian Lilley. I am still somewhat flabbergasted by just the insanity of which, and the hyperbole and the inane comments that Chrystia Freeland made. But I'm going to leave it to you to tell us exactly what she said if the Liberals don't increase the capital gains tax.
So she was in Scarborough, east end of Toronto on Sunday, and she's trying to lay out the argument for why this tax change needs to happen. And she is talking, one, she's lying through her teeth saying it's only going to affect 0.13%. They've fudged the numbers to get to that. But then she says, but these people are very successful. And I want to ask them, what kind of Canada do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a Canada where kids go to school hungry? Well, they already do, because you've made it impossible to buy food. You've made, inflation out of control. Your policies are disastrous. And then she says, and if we don't pass this, then more teenage girls will get pregnant because they can't afford their birth control. What? You're off your rocker. But that wasn't the worst of it, Adrienne. I'm going to read you a direct quote from my column. Let me just flip over here. She then says, in very dark tones, do you want to be in a country where those at the very top live lives of luxury, but must do so in gated communities behind ever higher fences, using private healthcare and airplanes, because the public sphere is so degraded and the wrath of the vast majority of their less privileged compatriots burns so hot, end quote.
Warren, hubris, thy name is Chrystia.
I like Brian's impersonation of Chrystia Freeland. It's pretty cool.
Oh, it's much more animated. She talks to Canadians like she's a kindergarten teacher reading to a bunch of 4-year-olds cross-legged on the carpet.
But I encourage people to read the transcript. When I saw the quotes, I actually didn't believe them.
I didn't either.
And so I went and found the transcript, and it's like run-on sentences. And it, to me, it was conclusive proof that the bars were open in Scarborough on Sunday. So it's nuts. The reason why they're out there playing defense and saying these ridiculous things, these extreme things, is because their plan on the capital gains tax is unpopular, and not just with rich doctors and lawyers and dentists. It's unpopular with a lot of people. And it's unpopular with Liberals because, as Brian likes to remind me, it was my former boss, Jean Chrystia, who reduced the capital gains, he and Paul Martin, some years ago. And it's these guys who've increased it.
Let's hammer this point, because Freeland keeps saying, well, John Diefenbaker brought it in and Brian Mulroney raised it to 75%. I think that was to pay for the programs and the debt of a previous Trudeau, but I could be mistaken. But then in 1 year, Jean Chrétien drops it from 75 to 66% in February of 2020. And then in October of, not 2020, sorry, in February of 2000, he drops it from 75% to 66. And then in October of 2000, drops it to 50%. And Paul Martin, standing in the House of Commons, said, this is about innovation and entrepreneurship, and if jobs are going to be created, I want them created in Canada. If companies are created, I want them created in Canada. If they're going to invest, I want them to invest in Canada. And guess what happened? Investment in Canada happened.
That's right.
It increased.
Bingo.
Yeah. Warren, I mean, we've said so many times, this is not, the Liberal Party that you grew up with, that you still questionably support, but nonetheless, I'm just even if we just step back from the party politics of it and the hyperbole of it and this craziness of what Freeland said, just the practicality of it. Canada's economy is already sluggish. We're behind in catching up from recovering from COVID. Our productivity is low. Our taxes are high, and we have housing crisis, healthcare crisis. None of this helps. None of what this policy does is actually helpful. And so you have to wonder, what is the rationale? Because you can't, I don't think Canadians buy anymore, Warren, the haves and versus the have-nots, because everyone's sort of like, I actually make a decent income and I'm still living paycheck to paycheck. So I don't think that that sort of class warfare thing works in an instance like this. So what's the thinking here?
I think the thinking is, well, firstly, they're not liberals, as you point out, in
Yeah.
the Liberal Party I grew up in. They're New Democrats, and they've formed an alliance with the New Democratic Party. And in many cases, the New Democratic Party is calling the shots. But I mean, I remember at the time, I thought too much emphasis was being placed on it. I thought, well, maybe he slipped. He couldn't possibly mean it. But, a decade ago, at the time when this guy was becoming prime minister, and it seems like a really long time ago, the budget will balance itself. And, subsequently, I've come to form the view that it was a very revealing comment. It was us being given an opportunity to peer into his economic consciousness. He really believes that. They really believe that. They believe that this economic stuff, like you pointed out, prosperity and jobs and investment in Canada, it all just kind of works itself out.
Yeah.
And we need to do anything in government. And that is not the case. As we saw during COVID, there are things that governments can and should do to safeguard people's health, but also the economy of the country. And so, I really do believe these guys don't get it. They don't get economic principles. And we're seeing that again. They think they just tax the hell out of everything and it'll all work out. Well, it's not working out. The country's economy is being hurt. And Justin Trudeau is the guy holding the murder weapon.
Brian, last word to you. The warning signs were there, as Warren just pointed out. Prime Minister Harper was trying to make the point that this guy is just out to lunch. So in 2015, he says the budget will balance itself. My personal favorite was the economy will grow from the heart outward. And then in 2021, he pulled out the old chestnut. I don't think about economic policy. Well, we should have believed him way back then, Brian.
Yeah, we should have believed him way back then. And I said at the time when he said, you'll forgive me if I don't care about or think about monetary policy. I said, well, if you don't care about monetary policy, then you're not caring about family budgets, because if you don't look after it, inflation's going to go crazy and people won't be able to afford things. I said that before inflation went crazy. And what are we dealing with now? And his response to all of that is say, well, we need to tax people more. He's trying to play this off that it's just, Galen Weston is going to pay all these taxes. And Galen Weston, of course, is the most evil person on the face of the planet in official Ottawa these days. Nobody is worse than Galen Weston. And so, he's trying to scapegoat the uber rich like that. But it is the family doctor. It's the guy that owns the restaurant around the corner. It's the guy that owns the dry cleaner down the street. The grain growers of Canada put out a look at what this will cost for the average family farm. And most of the family farms for grain growers are still family farms. They're not corporations, which is another bad word in Ottawa these days. To pass down a family grain farm in Ontario, from one generation to the next, you'll be paying the government an extra $1.1 million. Well, you haven't sold the farm, so you haven't made the capital gain. But because you're passing it to your son or your grandson, you're going to pay that money. In Saskatchewan, it's just shy of $1 million. In Alberta, it's 1.1. In Manitoba, it's 1.3 million. We've got 40% of farmers ready to retire to pass things on to the next generation, and it's going to cost them an additional 30%. It's not like there'd be no tax, but this is going to increase it by 30%. So an extra $1.1 million to pass down the family farm. If you're the young guy looking at that, do you go, ooh, that's an awful lot of debt for me to take on suddenly?
Yeah. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below, and like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to theTorontoSun.com. You're going to find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.